Thank you. Thank you. The chair will now recognize Mr. Weber for 5 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Fraser, South Texas has some of the best fishing in the world. Pardon me. I was listening to your discussion with Dr. Babin, and you talked about getting more data to exploit more fishes. I thought that was an interesting choice of words, exploit. How about enjoy? Would that be better?
Either one would work.
Okay, well, I'd like to request unanimous consent to change that word in the record. I'm not, just want to make sure that we have a lot of good fishing and that we do enjoy those and we do protect those fisheries.
Can I explain that further? Would that be all right?
I'm dying to hear.
Okay. So what happens is when we do a stock assessment, there's some uncertainty surrounding that assessment. And increased data collection allows us to increase the certainty, right? And when we increase the certainty, it's possible that we can adjust the quotas such that you can actually harvest or enjoy more fish. And so it's a case where increased data collection or an investment yields a positive economic benefit.
I get it. That's the most egregious word you could use to encourage that data collection. We're all adults here, and that's fine. But I have a question for all the witnesses. I'm from the Gulf Coast of Texas. Galveston and Freeport, Texas are both cities in my district with economic ties to shipping industries. The ports located there are important to both our local and national economy. We move 95% of the nation's LNG. We produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel, 20% of the nation's gasoline east of the Rockies, and that doesn't include the Port of Houston. So we're a huge energy district. Now, some of my colleagues, like the gentleman to my right, Mr. Posey in Florida, face a different challenge in adapting to this rise when compared to the ports and the tributaries I represent. In our area, in some of our district, ports would actually benefit from increased water levels. So I guess my question to each of the witnesses is, how could a more localized approach to mitigation help protect our economy and better prepare individual communities? Should there be a federal role in helping communities prepare and address these issues, and if so, what is it? How can we better address local communities? Should there be a federal role in doing this, and if so, what is it? Dr. Cooley, I'll start with you.
Well, I think we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that effects of climate change are regionally variable. And so there's no one-size-fits-all solution. As you noted, your region is going to have a different set of needs than Congressman Posey's district. There are best practices, however, that emerge from handling a particular issue, adapting to a particular issue, a type of issue, for example. We've learned quite a lot from the example of the shellfish growers in the Pacific Northwest. Those growers are now sharing their knowledge with growers in Maine, on the Gulf Coast, so that American aquaculture can thrive and grow with the benefit of foresight. So I think that's one thing the federal government can absolutely facilitate.
Thank you for the short answer. Dr. Horton, you got a hard act to follow.
Yeah, I think a blend of scales, as we heard. Each community is going to have unique solutions, but similarly, some solutions are going to need to operate at scales far beyond what a local community could afford. So I think we do need consistent policies in that regard. We also, just more practically, need to make sure that different adaptation strategies across, say, different agencies or different communities aren't operating at cross purposes, right? The sort of superficial example would be if one community, builds a seawall, does that increase the flooding for the nearby community? That's sort of an oversimplified example, but I think it's emblematic of why we need coordination. And
let's jump to Dr. Fraser. He seems to be the fishing expert, except for his one faux pas of exploit. And that would be, the oystering is huge in my district. So CO2 levels, and I read some of the testimony on the Japanese oysters that were brought over and how they've suffered some setbacks and stuff. So Dr. Fraser, for you, for my Gulf Coast district in Texas, what needs to be specifically aimed at the Gulf Coast there?
So I'm going to say that the federal government could invest in the science that's going to allow us to take some of these global scale models and be able to downscale them so that we can make predictions about specific regional areas like yours. Those predictions would allow us perhaps to develop the infrastructure that we need to deal with increased flooding, for example, or other storm-related events.
Is it Polaro, is that how you say that? I'm a little over time, but you've got 30 seconds with the indulgence of the chair. Thank you.
Without objection.
Well, Texas oysters are great. We'd like to have them around for a long time because I think with anything, diversity in the market is wonderful. And
You could stop right there, you know.
I think I will. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
No, go ahead and say the rest of what you were going to say.
I think that as Dr. Cooley said, some of the lessons learned from how shellfish are responding to these changes in the Northwest is applicable to what you might be seeing in Texas. And as people are seeing something that's different than what they've experienced, they should be encouraged to ask more questions to a broader audience, because it might be just the variability of something localized, or it might be something grander with some oceanographic element that's happening. So I think it's really important to look carefully and ask lots of questions about what might be happening there.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.